I saved her from the explosion, just seconds before the truth was consumed with the flames. But if you think that's the most dramatic part, you know nothing about my family. I'm Devin Russo, and this is a story I never wanted to tell. 7 years ago, I left the town of Oak Ridge. Without a word, without looking back. They called me a coward, a traitor. They said I abandoned her. But the truth, no one wanted to hear it. Until today. I returned to Oak Ridge on a late September afternoon, before it was quite autumn, but the sun was already fading. The wind from the lake blew through the birch trees, tickling the collar of my old shirt. 7 years, and the landscape had hardly changed, but the people were different. Completely different. I stopped the car in front of the ancient iron gate of my grandfather's villa, where I grew up all my childhood with long meals, loud laughter, and even confusing silences between adults. The gate is not locked. It seemed they weren't waiting for me, nor did they want me to come. Trey was the first to see me. He ran up from the backyard and put his arm around me without saying anything. Only his eyes were real, as if they said, "I'm glad you're back." Grandfather, Solomon Russo, turns 80 this year. He is the only person in my family who has never retracted what he said. Even the harshest words, or the warmest words. He is the mainstay both literally and figuratively. Today is his birthday and the whole family is gathered. Except me, the misfit who just reappeared after 7 years of absence. I walked into the main hall and all eyes stopped immediately. No hugs, no handshakes. Aunt Beverly raised her eyebrows. Uncle Norman squinted as if he were examining a criminal record. Only Trey patted me on the shoulder again and backed away afraid of being implicated. "Devin Russo," Uncle Norman said. "Oh, that's surprising. Maybe we should put an unauthorized strangers do not enter sign at the gate from now on." I didn't reply. I didn't come here to argue. I came for Grandpa. The outdoor party occurred in the backyard, close to the lake's edge. String lights strung between oak trees, white-clothed banquet tables, expensive wine. Everything was arranged impeccably. My family always knows how to organize parties for everyone look at and admire. But inside, it seems like you have a lot of free time, Aunt Beverly added. After 7 years of casting nets at the rig now, you remember your birthday. I looked up at her. I came for Grandpa, not to hear the same old things again. She narrowed her eyes. Old-fashioned Meredith thinks otherwise. That name, Meredith, was like a small blade gliding through the not-yet-healed scars in my heart. I thought time could erase everything. But no, the scar on my eyebrow may heal, but the thing with her, not yet. Before I could react, Norman's voice rang out cold and carefully prepared. "How about you tell everyone why you abandoned Meredith when she was pregnant? Why did you quietly disappear like a coward?" The air freezes. The whole backyard was so quiet that I could hear the soft sound of birch leaves falling on the eaves. I turned away, not out of fear, but because I'm trying to stay calm. "I don't know anything," I replied. "And you better stop before..." "Before what?" He stepped forward, pointing at me. "Before you run away again, like 7 years ago." Only Grandpa was still sitting there, silent, his eyes following as if he had seen this coming all along. And then, that voice rang out. From the left side, slight but unmistakable. "I will tell everyone the truth." Meredith walked out, her hair tied back, her hand holding a pale yellow folder. She looked at me, then at the rest of the Russo family, without flinching. "I have DNA evidence with me, and it's time everyone knows." Bam! A loud explosion tore through the air. The grill burst open. Smoke and flames shot high into the sky like a misplaced firework. Everyone shouted. I just saw myself rushing forward. Grab Meredith. Then he fell with her onto the grass. Everything burst. Papers fell everywhere. The smoke rolled thick like artificial fog, obscuring an entire backyard corner. The burning smell crept into every crevice of my shirt, every breath. A few screams echoed from the crowd, as chaotic and confusing as the blood rushing through me. I don't remember exactly how I rushed towards Meredith. I only know that when the fire shot up, the whole grill exploded into scorched pieces of iron. My legs automatically reacted. And now, in the middle of the grass, covered in coal dust, I saw her lying there, breathing hard, frightened but alive. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice cracking with adrenaline. She nodded slightly, her eyes still glued to the space where the pile of documents used to be. The DNA test pages were now ashes scattered across the lawn. Trey came to me, kneeling. "You saved her. You just saved her, Devin." I didn't reply. I'm looking at something else. Right behind Meredith was the document, or rather the smoke-soaked fragments of it. No longer intact. Unreadable. No longer evidence. "This wasn't an accident," I muttered, standing up. "Are you sure?" I just looked at Trey, unblinking. Sure. In the main house, the atmosphere was no less heavy. Someone turned on the TV loudly, trying to dilute the feeling of fear with the voice of a local news anchor. But no one listened. I walked through the living room. Everyone's eyes avoided. Aunt Beverly whispered something to a relative, and Norman stood against the wall, his arms folded as if waiting for the following accusation. And then I saw Cole. There he stood, unusually clean. His vest was smooth, and his face was clear of dust, as if he had stepped out of an advertisement, and not just witnessed an explosion in the middle of a family party. But what caught my attention wasn't that neat appearance. It's the shoes. Light brown color, soft leather sole. Shoes that anyone walking across the field will get muddy. But Cole's shoes had a faint white dust covering the soles. Not mud, it's a burn mark, or worse, gunpowder. "Where were you standing when the explosion happened?" I asked, my voice light. Cole looked up unfazed. "Next to Meredith. I caught her in time." I glanced at Meredith. She was still being treated by a nurse on the porch. Not confirmed, no objections. Cole smiled, a smile so perfect. I walked out into the backyard. Not because I needed air, but because I needed to observe him. From my position behind the porch, I saw Cole quietly take out his phone, type a few messages, then put the phone in his pocket. A minute later, my phone vibrated. Messages do not save names. 9 p.m., Willow Creek, alone. I looked at the text for a long while. No one signed, no one admitted. But the text message was enough to make me stand still in the middle of the ash-strewn yard. Willow Creek, the bridge where Meredith and I used to hide from this world. At exactly 8:59, I was there. The wooden bridge is still the same, old rickety, covered with green moss on both sides. The stream below has dried up since late summer, leaving exposed stones like the mist of time. Meredith was standing there. Her hair was loose, the wind blew gently, her face was mixed in the dim yellow light from the other shore. "I didn't text you," she said before I could open my mouth. "I know." I replied, silent. The wind whistled across both sides of the bridge. "7 years ago, you didn't leave me," she continued, looking at the wooden floor. I looked at her. "I pushed you away," Meredith whispered. "I begged you to leave Oak Ridge because I was threatened. Someone told me if I didn't, I would lose everything, lose the baby, lose my life." I stood still, every word she said reverberating in my head like a bell hitting an empty wall. I thought I was stronger, but at that time I was afraid. I clenched my fists and pursed my lips. "And the child?" I asked. She looked at me a very long time. "Shake your head. Not your child, Devin." I took a step back. My chest felt like someone had punched me straight. But she didn't stop there. And not Cole's child either. I don't know how long I was silent. The words Meredith had just said were like a short, sharp knife blade stuck deeply. Not my child, not Cole, so who? I looked at her, but she didn't shy away. Those eyes had nothing to hide, no more fear. There is no more hope. There was only the truth, naked and cold, lying there between the two of us like a crack that no one was trying to cover up anymore. I opened my mouth about to ask, but a sound of footsteps rang out from the end of the bridge, causing both of us to turn back immediately. Cole. He stepped out of the darkness as if he had been waiting there for a long time. The wind blew the flaps of his coat, and then I saw the metallic glint of the gun in his hand. I stepped lightly toward Meredith, putting myself between her and the gun. My hands clenched tightly, my mind spinning quickly. No one knows I'm here. Only him and her. Cole didn't speak right away. He looked at us, his head tilted slightly as if he was enjoying the scene before him, an ending scene he directed himself. "I told you, Meredith," he said, his voice even but sharp. "Don't bring up the past. Don't bring that file with you, but you never know how to listen." Meredith shivered behind me. I could feel it even without looking. I kept my voice calm, trying to buy time. "What are you afraid of, Cole?" "The truth, or losing your reputation as the Russo husband." Cole laughed. A dry, short laugh seemed to cut through the air. "I don't need that label. I need the land south of the lake. And to get it, I need a legal last name. I need Meredith. I need Russo." As I listened, my blood boiled with every beat. He doesn't love her. No pity for the child. He just used them as a shortcut. He orchestrated the marriage, the child that wasn't his, and the explosion that destroyed the papers. He knew Meredith was going to say it. He knew she had evidence. And he took action. I took another half step forward, my voice low and hoarse like an old wooden saw blade. "You don't need to threaten her. If there's a problem, I'm here. Talk to me." Cole squeezed the trigger but did not fire yet. He is wondering, maybe because I'm too close. Perhaps because he still thinks everything is under control. But I don't know, because at that moment, another voice rang out from behind him. It was hoarse, familiar like the old wooden hinges in the house I grew up in. "That's enough, Cole." Cole turned back, but not in time. My grandfather, Solomon Russo, stood there. His hands trembled, but he still steadily aimed straight at Cole with the family's old gun. The gun used to hang on the office wall seemingly just for decoration. But he knew. He always knows when to take back control. Gunfire rang out in the night, just one shot. Cole fell not dead, but motionless, the bullet piercing his left shoulder. Meredith screamed. I lunged forward, kicked the gun out of his hand, and pinned him to the ground. His blood spilled onto the wooden floor. Real blood this time, no lie. Flashlight scans from the top of the bridge, the sound of shoes running again. And then a stern female voice rang out, "It's the police." No one moves. Sheriff Donahue approached. Her face was as cold as every time I remembered, but there was something different in her eyes this time, as if she knew everything was about to become clear. Meredith slowly stood up, trembling, but then she pulled a small object from inside her coat, a recording device. The police chief reached out her hand to receive it without saying a word, just nodded, as if she had been waiting for this for a long time. He just confessed everything Meredith said breathlessly, and I wrote it all down. I looked at my grandfather. He didn't look at anyone, just quietly put away his gun and turned away. But before leaving the bridge, he stopped, turned around, his low voice rang out in the night. I used to think Devin was the one who disappointed me the most, but it turns out, those who know how to live in the dark, who are good at pretending to be light, are truly dangerous. We returned to the mansion just before dawn. The night before had been a storm none of us were prepared for. The people still awake in the house didn't ask any questions when Meredith, Trey, and Sheriff Donahue came through the front door. Cole had been rushed to the emergency room and Grandpa was nowhere to be seen. Only a faint trace of his cigarette smoke lingered near the hallway, indicating that he was still watching, in his way. I sat down on the chair, and before I could take off my coat, Trey walked in with a strange look. Not fear. It's not a relief either. It's a silent shock. "I need to see this," he said, handing me the phone. On the screen was a news report posted for less than 5 minutes. I skimmed the title, then stood up. District Attorney Norman Russo was officially arrested for concealing the truth about a land dispute and forging legal documents. The image of him, my uncle, appeared handcuffed, put into a police car. His face was neither angry nor panicked. There was only the inert silence of someone who thought he would never be touched. I gave the phone to Meredith. She read quietly, her hands shaking slightly, then looked up. "So, he knows. Everything." Trey nodded, his voice low with reluctant shame. "I think maybe he always knew, but never believed it would be exposed." I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. There was a dull sound in my head. Not anger, but something more profound. Feeling cheated. The feeling that what I thought was true turned out to be just puzzle pieces that someone intentionally rearranged in a way they wanted me to believe. I remembered what Norman said to me the day I left. Sometimes knowing less makes you live more peacefully. Now that I think about it, that wasn't advice. It's a warning. I turned to Meredith. "I said, Logan is not your child, nor is it Cole's, so," she bit her lip. Then she just looked at me for 1 second, 2 seconds. Her eyes seemed to acknowledge, like surrender, like apologize without saying anything. "I get it. I understand. Logan is the son of Norman Russo. Not an accidental mistake. A deliberate secret. A stain covered by silence and power for 7 years. A child put in the wrong place, not through any fault of his own, but because adults were so good at creating illusions. I don't know when I sat down on the old couch. All I know is that everything inside me seemed to be drifting away. A nameless emotion welled inside me. Pity for Logan and anger at myself for letting things drag on this long. Trey sat down next to me. "You don't know, but Logan always asks about you. He doesn't know anything but saw your photo in an old album. He once asked, 'Why does that person look like me?' I closed my eyes. This time, it was because I didn't want tears to overflow." The office door opened. Solomon walked out slowly, but decisively. In his hand, he held a yellowed envelope. He looked at each person in the room. His eyes looked deep, as if he could understand even the unsaid things. Then he stopped in front of me, put the envelope in my hand without saying a word. I opened it. Inside is a copy of the will. But the notable part is not the property. It's a handwritten note signed by him to Devin. The truth always comes late, but it is the only thing that never needs permission to exist. I looked up. He nodded, then turned away and walked out onto the porch. No need to say anything more. No need to ask what I will do. I know you let me choose. I sat on my grandfather's porch at dawn. It wasn't too cold in Oak Ridge early in the fall, but the wind carried something ancient, like the breath of secrets that had been dug up overnight. In front of me, the lake surface was as quiet as if it had never witnessed an explosion, had never heard a gunshot, and had never known a confession. I sipped my cold coffee, not because I needed to stay awake, but because I didn't know what else I could do. My back hurt. My chest ached, but my head felt empty, as if after the truth had been revealed all that was left was a void. The door behind opened. "It's Trey. Logan is in the front yard," he said softly, then fell silent. "I'm not going back." "Does he know anything?" Meredith said he just thought there was an incident at the party. He didn't hear anything about Cole or Norman. I nodded. Part of me feels grateful for that. Logan deserved to know, but not this way. Not right now. Are you going to tell him? Trey asked further. I didn't answer right away, just overlooking the lake. A white heron had just swooped down onto the water as quietly as a thin streak of ink on a half-written page. I used to think, I said slowly, that if I stayed away and didn't do anything wrong, then I wouldn't be responsible. But sometimes doing nothing is a form of cruelty. Trey was silent, a kind of silence of someone who understands. I stood up, stepped down the steps. This time, it's not about leaving. Logan was sitting alone under a red maple tree. In the boy's hand was a metal toy car, a birthday gift I gave Meredith nearly 8 years ago when I didn't know I would disappear soon after. I walked over slowly. Logan looked up. The boy's eyes were clear, bright, and heartbreakingly similar to Norman. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. Uncle Devin, the boy, smiled unguarded. "I miss you. Mom showed me a picture of you when you were young. You looked so silly." I laughed softly. The laughter was off-key, but real. I sat down next to him. "Are you happy here?" The boy nodded. Everyone was dressed up. But I was scared when the stove exploded. Mom fell. I saw her crying. I knotted my throat tight. "Your mother is courageous, and strong too." The boy was silent for a bit. Mom said there was a time when Uncle left to protect her. I looked at Logan. "What do you think?" The boy shrugged. "If it were me, I would do the same. I like you. You're like someone I've never had." I swallowed hard. My chest felt like an invisible string was squeezing it. I'm not saying I'm not his father, nor does it say that his uncle is the biological father. Those things are the burden of adults. Logan doesn't need to wear it yet. Not now. I just put my hand on his shoulder. "You know I won't go anywhere else if you want." Logan turned around. "Really?" I nodded. "Real." And the smile appeared light but bright enough. As for me, I feel like a piece of something in my heart is finally back in its proper place. That evening, I sat in my grandfather's office. The desk lamp shines on the white paper. The envelope he gave me this morning is still next to me. I took the pen. Not to write anything significant, just one simple line. "I'm sorry for letting things go this far, but from tomorrow I'll start again." I don't know if you read it. Do you keep it? But I need to write it down, because I need to believe it myself. A week later, Oak Ridge was as if nothing had happened. Local newspapers reported that the explosion was a technical accident, while information about Norman Russo's arrest was hidden behind a few small lines. The Russo family, or the flashy shell that once bore that name, no longer appears at town council meetings, is no longer a central topic at the dinner table. They retreated into silence, each person, in different ways. My grandfather still doesn't say much, but he leaves his office door open every morning, and I understood. That was his way of letting me know I'm still listening. Occasionally, he looked at me as I walked across the porch, and although his gaze remained cold, it was no longer an appraising look. It's a verification. One, what will you do next? I don't have an answer right away. Just know that every day I take Logan to school. I no longer avoided Meredith's gaze. Every evening, we sit together and talk briefly, not about the past, not to mention the future. Just for now, and sometimes that's enough. One afternoon, as the last sunlight poured over the backyard like a thin strip of silk, Meredith came and sat next to me. Her hand held a cup of hot tea. Her eyes were thoughtful, but no longer avoiding it. "I used to think," she began, that everything would be okay when you left, that your sacrifice would keep us safe. I don't interfere. She needed to be told. But I was wrong. She shook her head. It was the not telling the truth that kept me from living in peace. It wasn't the death threats that killed me. It was the silence. I looked over. Do you regret it now? She smiled lightly. If it weren't for those years, I wouldn't have Logan. I wouldn't have the courage to stand up for myself. I don't regret the past. I only regret we weren't brave sooner. I nodded. Me too. No one said more, but the silence between us is no longer scary. It's like an unspoken commitment from now on. No one will run away. Logan ran out with a tank top and an old comic book that night. Uncle Devin, tell me a story about Grandpa. I raised my eyebrows. Mr. Solomon. The boy nodded. I think you look like a lion. You always look fierce, but you probably love your children and grandchildren right. I laughed. Yeah, he was the type of person who would shoot someone because he loved someone else, but would never say it. So, are you like him? I looked at it, so long, then nodded. Maybe. But you will be different in one place. Anywhere, you will learn how to say it. A month later, when Norman's first hearing began, I wasn't there. I stood in the Logan schoolyard waiting for him to finish school. Meredith also did not go to court. We don't need to win anything. There is no need for anyone to declare who is right and who is wrong. The truth has been told. The only thing left is to choose how to live with it. I watched Logan run out of the school gate. The afternoon sun shines on her light brown hair and sparkling eyes. In that moment, I realized I don't have to be the creator of a life to do right by it. I just need to stay. Don't run, not silent. We can't go back, but we can start again. Not from the beginning, but from the truth. If you're still sitting here, listening until the end, thank you. Really thank you. Stories like this are not meant to be told well. It's about touching something tangible. If you find yourself somewhere in Devin, in Meredith, or even in those moments when no one speaks up, perhaps we are not alone. Let's press register if you want to continue following the stories of life, rough but true, their turns, imperfect but courageous. And if you've ever experienced something that makes you choose between escape and face, please leave a comment. No need to be lengthy, just one line I've returned. Because sometimes, a story is told a heart is healed.